Tonight, I've gathered some of the darkest and most chilling, true horror stories from across the internet. Stories whispered in forgotten forums, buried in late-night Reddit threads, and shared by people who swore they'd never speak of it again. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Get comfortable, put your headphones in, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Let's begin. The job was straightforward: overnight security at the old Donovan textile mill, an abandoned factory due to be demolished in a few months. The pay was decent, especially for a college student needing extra cash. People said the place was creepy. Sure, but I didn't believe in ghost stories. I figured it'd be an easy gig. Show up, walk around with a flashlight, make sure no one was trespassing or vandalizing the property, and then study during the quiet hours. My first shift started on a cold, foggy night. The damp mist seemed to swallow the beams of my flashlight as I patrolled the outer perimeter of the building. The factory was massive, with relics of its bustling past, now silent: broken windows, rusting machinery, walls scarred with graffiti. As I made my way inside, the enormity of the deserted space hit me. The echo of my footsteps in the vast empty production hall was unnerving. I reminded myself that the only dangers here were likely rats, or maybe the occasional homeless person seeking shelter. I was halfway through checking the ground floor when I heard a noise above me. Footsteps, unmistakably human, heavy and hurried. My heart skipped a beat. Squatters were common in places like this, but you never knew if they were desperate, or dangerous, or both. "Hello," I called out, trying to sound authoritative. "Security, you need to leave the premises immediately." No answer. The footsteps paused, then started again, moving away. I grabbed my radio. "I've got someone in here, going to check it out," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse raced. I made my way to the stairwell, the beam of my flashlight flickering nervously. As I climbed, the second floor was even less welcoming. A labyrinth of old offices and storage rooms, littered with debris and the sharp smell of mold. I followed the sounds to an office at the far end of the hall. The door was ajar. I pushed it open slowly, shining my light inside. The room was empty, except for an old desk and a filing cabinet. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I swung the flashlight around, catching a glimpse of a figure darting through the door on the other side of the room. "Hey, stop!" I shouted, chasing after them. My heart pounded as I ran through the connecting rooms. The figure, a man, by the look of it, was fast, but I was gaining on him. We burst out onto the roof. The fog was thicker here, the edges of the building blurred. The man was cornered now, nowhere left to run. He spun around to face me, his face obscured by a hood. "Look, just leave, okay? You don't want to be here when the cops show up," I warned him, trying to catch my breath. He hesitated, then pulled back his hood, and my words died in my throat. The man's face was battered, his eyes wild with fear. He wasn't a regular squatter. He was terrified, desperate. "They're after me," he gasped, his voice hoarse. "You have to help me, please." Before I could respond, another sound came from the stairwell, the unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. We weren't alone. As I stood frozen on the foggy roof, the chill seemed to seep deeper into my bones. The man in front of me, his face marked by bruises and fear, glanced frantically over my shoulder towards the stairwell. My hand tightened on the flashlight, the only weapon I had, as the click of the gun echoed ominously in the damp air. "Who's after you?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the escalating tension. "Doesn't matter, you need to go. Get out before they come up," he urged, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. But before I could move, two figures emerged from the stairwell, blocking our only way down. They were both large, menacing, dressed in dark clothing that blended into the shadows. One held a gun, aimed directly at us. "There's nowhere to go," the one with the gun said, his voice cold and calm. "You security guy, step away from him." I hesitated, my mind racing. The roof offered no cover, no alternative exits. It was a dead end. Slowly, I stepped aside, raising my hands to show I wasn't a threat. The man who had been running looked at me with a mix of apology and despair. "Sorry," he muttered before turning to face his pursuers. I didn't tell him anything. "I know," the gunman said. Then, without another word, he shifted his aim and fired. The shot rang out, loud and shocking in the quiet night. The man crumpled to the ground, and I flinched, shock and horror freezing me in place. The gunman then turned his attention to me, and I felt a cold dread wash over me. "As for you," he began, his gun still pointed at me. "You didn't see anything. What do you want?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just your silence," he replied. "Walk away from here tonight. Forget what you saw, and you'll be fine." They backed away slowly, keeping their eyes and the gun on me until they reached the stairwell and disappeared from view, leaving me alone with the fallen man. I rushed to his side, but it was too late. He was gone, a life extinguished on a cold, forgotten rooftop. Numb, I pulled out my phone to call the police, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. As I waited for them to arrive, I couldn't help but replay the night's events over and over in my head. The terror, the chase, the cold finality of the gunshot. The night had turned into a nightmare. The police arrived quickly, and I told them everything. The investigation would drag on for weeks, uncovering connections to a local crime ring that used the old mill to conduct their business away from prying eyes. The man on the roof was a former member, who knew too much, and I was just a witness who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Working the night shift at the old industrial park was never my first choice, but the bills needed paying, and the security job paid well enough. The park had mostly been abandoned, with just a few warehouses still storing old furniture and construction materials. It was supposed to be a quiet job, just making the rounds and ensuring no one tried to sneak in. My first few shifts were uneventful, the only sounds being the occasional scurry of rats and the distant hum of highway traffic. But tonight felt different. It was quieter, the usual hum oddly absent, and the air hung heavy with fog, dampening even the sound of my footsteps. As I made my way past Warehouse 12, my flashlight beam caught something unusual, a door slightly ajar. This was strange. I had checked it no more than an hour ago, and it had been securely locked. My heart thudded a little as I approached the door, radioing in to report the anomaly. "Probably just forgot to check it properly," mumbled Rick, the dispatcher, his voice crackling through the radio. "Just secure it and keep moving." I wasn't so sure. I pushed the door open slowly, the old hinges groaning under the weight. Inside, the warehouse was pitch black, vast and silent. I stepped inside, my flashlight slicing through the darkness. That's when I heard it, a soft clattering sound, like metal scraping against concrete. It came from the back of the warehouse, swallowing my fear. I moved forward, my light trembling slightly in my hand. As I rounded a stack of crates, my light fell on something that made me stop dead. It wasn't what I saw, but what I didn't see. One of the large crates, previously reported as sealed and accounted for, was now open, its contents partially emptied. Before I could inspect further, a sharp sound echoed behind me. It was the door, slamming shut with a resounding thud. I spun around, heart racing, only to see that I was now plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in the suffocating blackness of the warehouse. Panic surged as I fumbled for my radio. "Rick, the door just shut on me, and my light's gone out. I need backup," I whispered, my voice shaking. Static filled the airwaves for a moment, before Rick's reply came through, oddly distorted. "Backup's on the way. Just sit tight, Hannah." Trying to calm my racing heart, I backed against a wall, straining my ears for any sound. That's when I realized the soft metallic scraping had started again, closer this time, accompanied by a low, dragging step. Someone or something was in there with me. I held my breath, praying for the backup lights to kick in, but the darkness remained complete. The scraping grew louder, more purposeful, and then stopped abruptly. A whisper floated through the darkness, chillingly close. "Found you." A chill shot down my spine as the whisper reached my ears. Found you. The words were almost playful, but there was a menacing undertone that froze me in place. My back was pressed against the cold wall of the warehouse, and I felt every ounce of security drain from me as the realization hit. I was not alone, and the backup lights were not coming on. I tried to respond, to shout for help again into my radio, but my voice caught in my throat. The silence that followed the whisper was oppressive, and I strained my ears for any hint of movement in the dark. Nothing. It was as if the entire world had paused, holding its breath along with me. Then the sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse, slow and deliberate. They were coming toward me. I felt around in the dark, my hands shaking as I searched for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers brushed against a piece of broken pallet wood, and I gripped it tightly, not sure if I would have the courage to use it. The footsteps stopped, and I could hear breathing now, ragged and close. "Why are you here?" The voice was deeper than before, almost curious. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "I work here. Security. You shouldn't be here. Please just leave." My words felt hollow, ineffective. There was a soft chuckle, and then the voice spoke again, closer this time. "I can't do that. You see, you found something you shouldn't have." Panic surged through me, and I blurted out, "What do you want?" "For you to forget," the voice replied simply. And then, before I could react, there was a rush of movement, a shadow lunging out of the darkness. I swung the piece of wood instinctively, feeling it connect with something solid. There was a grunt of pain, and then I was running, my feet carrying me blindly through the dark, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to get away. The warehouse seemed to stretch on forever, a maze of crates and shadows. I could hear the person chasing me, their footsteps quick and angry. Just as I thought I couldn't run anymore, I saw a sliver of light, a door, slightly ajar, leading outside. I pushed through it, stumbling into the cool night air. I didn't stop to look back. I just kept running until I reached the main gate of the industrial park, my lungs burning and my mind racing. I called the police as soon as I was out, my hands still trembling as I tried to explain what had happened. They arrived quickly, but when they searched the warehouse, there was no sign of the intruder. The open crate I had seen was there, but whatever had been partially removed was gone. Now, the officers suggested it might have been a thief, disturbed by my presence, but I knew it was something more. Whoever that person was, they weren't just stealing physical items. They were desperate to protect a secret, something hidden deep within the old warehouse, something worth attacking for. I quit the job the next day. I couldn't bear the thought of going back, of facing the darkness and the whispers. It was my first week working the night shift alone at the old Millfield factory, a sprawling complex that had been converted into a storage facility for various companies. The job was simple: monitor the security cameras, do hourly rounds, and keep the place secure until the morning crew arrived. I had always been a night owl, so the solitude and quiet of the night shift appealed to me. At least, that's what I thought. The first couple of nights were uneventful. Just me, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and the occasional scurry of a mouse across the concrete floor. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to cling a little longer in the corners, or how the wind outside howled through the broken panels up in the old loading docks, creating a low, mournful wail. At around 2 a.m., I started my hourly round a little earlier than scheduled. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, and I figured a walk might help clear my head. I grabbed my flashlight and the heavy set of keys from the desk and headed out into the main warehouse. As I walked, the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, casting long, sinister shadows among the rows of metal shelving. It was quiet, too quiet, and every sound seemed amplified. When I reached the far end of the warehouse, I paused to check the back exit, making sure it was securely locked. That's when I heard it, a soft thud from the upper floor, like something heavy being dropped. I froze, listening. The factory was supposed to be empty, and the only way up to the second floor was back at the main stairs near the security office. Heart pounding, I made my way back, my steps quick and quiet. As I approached the stairwell, the sound came again, followed by what could only be described as dragging. Someone was up there. Maybe a squatter, I thought, or someone left behind from the second shift. With a deep breath, I began to ascend the stairs, the old wood creaking under my weight. At the top, the door to the second floor was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, my flashlight sweeping across the room. The light flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in the far corner. I blinked, and it was gone. Just shadows, I told myself. Just shadows. I stepped into the room, the air stale and cold. The dragging sound had stopped, replaced by a palpable silence. I moved deeper into the room, checking behind boxes and equipment, my flashlight my only guide. Then, without warning, something slammed into me from behind, sending me sprawling to the floor. My flashlight skittered away, casting erratic shadows as it spun. Dazed, I tried to get up, but a sharp pain shot through my leg. I had twisted it badly in the fall. Panic set in. As I realized I was not alone, I could hear breathing, heavy and ragged, somewhere in the dark, just beyond my reach. I scrambled toward my flashlight, my hands finally closing around it just as the figure lunged at me again. I swung the flashlight hard, connecting with something solid. There was a grunt, and then the weight was gone. I didn't wait to see more. Ignoring the pain in my leg, I hobbled as fast as I could back to the stairs, down the hall, and into the safety of the security office. Locking the door behind me, I collapsed against it, my breath ragged, and my heart racing. I had survived, but barely. The rest of the night, I watched the cameras, my eyes darting to every flicker of movement, every shadow. As dawn broke, and the first hints of sunlight began to filter through the dusty windows, the police arrived. They searched the building but found no one. Whatever, or whoever had attacked me, had disappeared into the early morning light, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps and a night of terror that would haunt me long after my shift had ended. Still leaning against the security office door, I listened as the police moved through the factory. Their radios crackled occasionally, a reassuring sound that I wasn't alone anymore. I winced as I shifted, trying to find a less painful position for my swollen ankle. The events of the night replayed in my mind, each detail sharp and terrifying. A knock at the door jolted me from my thoughts. "It's the police. You can open up now," a firm voice announced. I unlocked the door, relieved yet anxious about what they might have found. Two officers stood there, their expressions unreadable. "We've swept the building," one of them, Officer Martinez, informed me. "Found no one." "You're sure you saw someone?" I nodded, feeling a flush of frustration. "Yes, I'm sure. They attacked me. There's got to be some sign of them." The other officer, Officer Hale, glanced at her notes. "We did find some disturbances, some boxes overturned on the second floor, and there are signs someone might have been staying there. Old food containers, blankets, but no one was there when we checked." They asked me more questions, details about the attack, descriptions of any sounds or visuals I might have caught. It was all a blur, but I did my best, trying to piece together the terror of those moments in the dark. "Okay, we'll file a report. You might want to get that ankle checked, and maybe take a few nights off," Officer Martinez suggested with a sympathetic look. "We'll patrol the area tonight, just in case." After they left, I sat back down, the adrenaline finally wearing off, leaving behind a throbbing pain in my ankle and an unsettling sense of vulnerability. The factory seemed different now. Every shadow held a threat, every noise a warning. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching me. Even though the police had found nothing, the factory had always been a place of routine and solitude. But now, it felt like a scene from a nightmare. I called my boss, explaining what had happened, and that I'd need to take some time off. He was understanding and suggested I take as long as needed to recover. That night, I went home but found no relief in the familiar. Sleep was elusive, each sound in my apartment a trigger for panic. When I finally did drift off, it was only to wake moments later from nightmares of dark figures and unseen threats. The next few days were a blur of doctor's visits for my ankle, restless nights, and anxious days. I kept in touch with the police, but their patrols turned up no further signs of the intruder. Without new evidence, there was little they could do. Determined to find some answers, I decided to return to the factory during the day. The sunlight made it seem less menacing, but the memories were still fresh. I went up to the second floor, to the place I had been attacked. Looking around, I noticed something I hadn't before. A small, almost hidden door in the corner, partially obscured by crates. Curious and cautious, I approached it, pushing the door open. Inside was a small room, filled with various items. More blankets, a flashlight, some batteries, and a photo. It was an old, faded photo, but the image was clear enough. A group of workers in front of the factory, dated back to the 1970s. And there in the back was a figure that made my blood run cold. It was the man I had seen, or at least his spitting image. Chills ran down my spine as I stared at the photo. Had I seen a ghost, or was it someone connected to the factory's past, hiding out in a place they once knew? I took the photo, planning to show it to the police. As I left the factory that day, the weight of unanswered questions hung heavy on my shoulders. The shadows no longer felt menacing. Instead, they seemed to hold secrets, whispers of a past that refused to stay buried. As I walked away from the factory with the old photo in hand, my mind raced with possibilities. The resemblance between the man in the photo and my attacker was uncanny. Could it really be a coincidence? Or was there something deeper, something rooted in the history of the factory itself? I decided to visit the local library to see if I could dig up any information on the factory and its employees. From the 1970s, the librarian, Mrs. Elkins, was more than willing to help when I explained my strange and frightening experience. She led me to a collection of local archives, newspaper clippings, employment records, and photographs from the area. Poring over the dusty files, I soon found more information about the factory during its operational years. It was a thriving place once, a hub of activity and community life. But then I came across a series of articles that chilled me to the bone. There had been a series of accidents in the factory, some fatal. Workers had protested unsafe conditions, leading to a strike that temporarily shut down the factory. One article in particular caught my attention. It detailed a tragic incident where a worker, identified as George Marlowe, had been fatally injured in a machinery accident. His picture accompanied the article, and my heart skipped a beat. It was the man from my photo. The resemblance to my attacker was undeniable. I showed Mrs. Elkins the old photo I had found, pointing out George Marlowe. She squinted at it, then at the newspaper article. "Oh dear," she murmured. "That's George all right. He was a bit of a legend around here. Died tragically young. They say he loved the factory, considered it his second home. Could he have family still in the area? Maybe someone who looks like him?" I asked, grappling with the logic of it all. "It's possible," she conceded. The Marlowes were a big family, but many of them moved away after the factory closed down. Hard times, you know. Armed with this new information, I went to the police station to share my findings. Officer Martinez looked over the articles and photo with a skeptical frown. "You think there's a family resemblance to someone who might be lurking in the factory now?" "It's the only lead I have," I admitted, feeling slightly foolish, but too invested to back down now. The police agreed to do another sweep of the factory, this time focusing on the possibility of a descendant or relative of George Marlowe using the factory as a hideout. I accompanied them, anxious to put an end to the mystery and my fears. The search was thorough, and it wasn't long before we discovered a hidden living space in the basement. Clothes, food supplies, and personal items that indicated someone had indeed been staying there for quite some time. Among the items was a diary, which contained entries that spoke of preserving George Marlowe's legacy and avenging the injustices of the past. The diary's last entry chillingly referenced the presence of trespassers in the factory, confirming my fears that the attacks were motivated by a perceived invasion of George's home. With the evidence gathered, the police were able to track down a distant relative of George Marlowe, who was indeed living rough and believed he was protecting his ancestors' territory. He was taken into custody,